Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through the Council's website. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you are not addressing the meeting. Writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute, and if you are in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members, and no material shall be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting, so we can keep track on whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. Now, we have important reports to consider here today, and I anticipate that we will deal with the business in our usual efficient manner. Before we begin, I have a couple of intimations to read. Laura Kilty has been awarded the National Youth Worker of the Year Award for 2024 for the Youth Link Scotland. Laura is the Youth Development Worker for Wigtonshire as part of Dumfries and Galloway Council's Youth Service Programme. The National Youth Worker of the Year Award recognises youth workers with dedication to improving the lives of young people who deliver high-quality services which are making a positive impact on young people, and their contribution is recognised and respected by young people, youth workers and partners. Laura is such an inspirational and committed youth worker, and her commitment to young people in Wigtonshire is seen every day by partners, schools and young people. Along with her work in Wigtonshire, Laura has also led the development of a number of regional projects, including the Young Women's Network, volunteer programmes, and the Year of Young People programme. And we would not have a number of these key projects if it was not for Laura's leadership. Laura's award is extremely well-deserved and a testament to wider sector in the region, and I am sure you will join me in congratulating Laura. Thank you. We would also like to congratulate and show our delight in announcing that following a recent assessor visit prior to the summer holidays, Kirkham, Lesalt and Portpatrick primary schools have been awarded Gold in Rights Respecting Schools. This is a tremendous achievement and testament to all the hard work of Mrs. McHarg in taking this forward with the support of the head teacher, Sheila Bailey. So well done to all involved. Thank you. Tracy, can you provide the sederant and any apologies, please?
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Morning, members. We've got 22 members present in total, 13 present in Council HQ, being the Chair, the Vice Chair, Councillor Ashburn, Councillor Dorward, Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Jameson, Councillor McGregor, Councillor Stevenson, Councillor Stitt, Councillor Wilson, and we've got Julie Irvin, our representatives, Greg Black, Lisa Binney, and we've also got 9 members present on Microsoft Teams, being Councillor Brodie, Councillor Karen Crothers, Councillor Dempster, Councillor Hill, Councillor Little, Councillor McCammon, Councillor Young, and we've also got our 2 youth reps joining us today, Riley Brannan and Max. They're both present on Microsoft Teams. And we've got 8 members not present at the start of the meeting, being Councillor Dougie Campbell, Councillor Ingalls, Councillor Scobie, Councillor Wood, and our parent rep, Stuart Clement, is also not present at the start, Chair.
Thank you, Tracy, and I approve of members' remote participation. Yes, Councillor McGregor.
It's just to say that Councillor Ingalls intends to be attending, but I think he's just running a bit late.
Thank you. We'll move to item 2. Do we have any declarations of interest? Yes, Councillor.
Me? Yeah. Okay, thanks, Chair. It's for item 5. I'm a wee bit unsure of where I should be going with this, whether it's association or declare an interest. One of the facilities that's part of that is actually managed by my daughter. So I think there's no decisions getting taken. It's an update, it's a progress report, isn't it? But just in case there was, I think it'd be safer for me to declare an interest, and I'll go out during that discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Brodie.
Thanks, Chair. Item 4, the event strategy. Our member one, History Town Group. And I would like to declare a statement of connection to that. They're not mentioned in the report, but I want to mention their good work during that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. Can I declare a connection in item 4? A family member is heavily involved with the Stranraer Oyster Festival. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jamieson.
Yes, just to declare an interest, Agenda 6. A family member is a learning assistant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jamieson. Councillor Stevenson.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just ask if Councillor Brodie can repeat what he said? I didn't hear a word of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Brodie, could you please repeat your interest? Thank you.
Declare a statement of connection. I remember one in the History Town Group. Yeah, but I intend to refer to the good work in the item, although they're not mentioned on the agenda. Thank you.
If it helps, Councillor Brodie is declaring an interest in item 4 as he's a member of Annan District Town Group.
It's a statement of connection. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3, the minutes of the meeting. Do we have approval of the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you. We'll now move to item 4. Dumfries and Galloway Event Strategy Funding Programmes, a report by Executive Director of the Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing. We have Lee Seaton and Ian Barr are here to assist if members have any questions. I will open up the meeting to members' debate. Thank you. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question. It's more to put on record my personal thanks, but also the Council's thanks to Ian Barr for the tremendous amount of work he does within this space. And I've said it before in seminars and other spaces, but this is a public forum. Ian's very much a one-man band in this space and covers a tremendous number of events throughout the year. He attends many of them, he scopes new events, and I just want it on record just how incredible the work he does within this space is and how much it enriches the region and brings things to the region. So just to extend a thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Dashper.
Thanks, Chair. No, I welcome the report, and particularly the addition of Stranraer Oyster Festival is a signature event in my ward, just to be a little bit local. But 4.19 talks about the proposed events conference. I'm just wondering if you could maybe speak a bit more to that. It says that demand for the conference was established through networking events, and we want to set aside £5,000 to hold this conference. So I'm just wondering, what does this conference achieve that a networking event doesn't achieve? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dashper. Yes.
Thank you. This year we had 33 people came to a half-day networking event from festivals event organisations across the region. At that event, Event Scotland presented the new national events strategy for the region, and there was a request that we extended this event next year. And with the emergence of our Regional Events Growth Fund and other funding programmes, there's more and more organisations getting involved in festivals and events across the region. And so I think a regional events conference will be successful next year and attract a healthy number of delegates.
Does that help, Councillor Dashper?
Yeah, I'm just sort of wondering, how exactly would the money be spent? I mean, is this a one-day event, a two-day event? Do we know? Thanks.
It's going to be discussed at the meeting of the new Signature Events and Signature Events Forum next week. So I would imagine it's a one-day event to bring people from across the region and invited speakers and presenters.
That's useful. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this report, Lee and Ian. I'm looking at page 22, table 2. In 4.16, just above the table, it says signature events for 25, 26 and also 26, 27. The table only has the first of these years, 25, 26, and I'm wondering if it's a misprint in 4.16 or has a column been missed out from the table. And just before the officers answer that, I could remind that the Stranraer Oyster Festival is to be featured in an hour-long country file edition on BBC this Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Thank you. Yes. Yes, Lee.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Apologies, members. Councillor Young is very sharp-eyed, and indeed the table is only showing 25, 26, and that is correct. We're not able at this stage with the current funding arrangements to ask you to agree for anything for the year beyond 26, 27, so that should not refer to 26, 27. You're only being asked to agree signature event funding in relation to 25, 26. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that help, Councillor Young?
Yes, that answers everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a question on the funding. See, if some of these festivals and big events hadn't to go ahead, would we be able to recoup some of the funding that we've given them? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen. Yes, Lee?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's certainly our intention, Councillor Stevenson. So each funding organisation that we agree to fund, we enter into a service agreement with them. We have an example just now where we have a festival that was cancelled last year, but through this or through our previous parent committee, we did seek agreement to carry funding forward to host into the next year. But within any agreements where there is proportionate, reasonable spend that is attributed to a festival that has been cancelled, that is deemed to be accepted. But where there is unspent grant, then that's when we seek to recoup that back.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Councillor Brodie?
Thanks, Chair. We've got some really good signature events here in Stranraer and contribute in the base, and they're really important to growing the local economy. I would like to make the point that there are no signature events in the east of the region, in Landale and Eskdale, and I think we should be looking at how we can include the east in these signature events. Our I would highlight the credentials of the Annan History Festival, which has been on for the last 4 years and has been very successful, organising over 50 things over the summers in these years. And as I say, this group was formed as a response to the loss of jobs at Pinnies to try and bring more growth into the local economy. As you know, Annan is one of the areas with most levels of poverty in the region. And I would like to, the future report, we bring the report, we report how Annan can be included in signature events from next year on. So that's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Lee or Ian, would you like to take that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I take the points that I think I may have caught the connections very poor, I understand. So I think there was reference to signature events, opportunities within the east of the region as part of what I picked up within that comment. The first point I would add is that the advancement process that's in front of you today is one of the recommendations was an open process, so that was open for all events within our region to choose to come forward if they felt they would meet the criteria. So there were no additional events from the east of the region that came forward to that open process, and certainly that opportunity was afforded to them. However, through our events officer, absolutely, if there are specific events that wish to seek to grow and develop themselves, then we'll encourage them to reach forward to us and we'll give them all the support we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brodie, does that answer your question?
Thanks. I think that, yeah, I'll certainly go around the table and talk to the officer on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. We don't appear to have... Yes, Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just congratulate the Chair and the Vice Chair on their appointment to Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing Committee. And I hope you have more success than I did at the inaugural committee in finding an acronym for this somewhat extended title. Perhaps you'd have a competition for that, but congratulations on your appointments. In terms of my question, tourism is rightly recognised as a big part of our region's economy, and it's right that we have oversight of this report. And can I also record our thanks to Lee Seaton too for his dedication to his role, because I think Lee and Ian work very well as a team, so I think we should record that as well. In terms of the question, it's the app 1 and 2 in terms of dates for submission to major and regional events. And they're down to the 22nd of November, so the submissions for funding are 22nd of November. Is that enough time for the assessment to be held and for event people to have funding awarded, to actually put that in and make it happen properly? I think, is that not a bit late? I'm just asking the question, or has it always been like that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Lee, would you like to? Ian.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to extend my appreciation to Lee as well, and I do think we work well as a team to support festivals and events in the region. I believe the deadline of the 22nd of November is more than enough time for events organisations to apply to our 2 funds. The Council makes itself available to respond to any queries, and we support applications as best we can as they're being prepared. The deadline is quite tight because it enables the Council and the Events Partnership to review all the applications in December and January to come back as early as possible in the new year with the funding recommendations, and that helps the planning cycle for festivals and events.
Yes, Councillor Dorward, do you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. I get that. You said yourself it's quite tight. You know, I understand the support for people who want to run events to put in their application. I totally understand that. But in terms of the timescales, you've got Christmas break and things, which most people like to take a break at Christmas. In terms of the panel who's assessing, I just think it's a bit tight in terms of them planning and looking forward to running events in the new financial year. I'm just wondering if anything can be done about that, because we do that fairly often. We have very tight timescales for all sorts of applications, and it must be challenging for people who run events or run anything to actually put the application in properly. And then you've got a rush to assess. And you said, well, you called it tight timescales. I'd say, you know, to assess these things. Is it not easier to give the panel assessing a bit more time to do that properly? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dorwood. Just maybe to elaborate a little bit further, I think, on the process. So it is the Events Partnership, first of all, who study, Ian, first of all, as Events Officer, receives them, does an analysis and evidence of all of those applications and provides that summary to the Events Partnership. And just for members' benefit, the Events Partnership is a body that is made up of representatives from council officers, from SOSI, from Event Scotland, from South of Scotland Destination Alliance, etc., so that we can then provide recommendations to this committee in order for members to make decisions. So there's probably a couple of things in there. We have just now an events partnership meeting scheduled for January. The reason that we have that in January to receive the summary of Ian's initial work on all the applications is that we can then meet the timelines to come back to this committee in February in order that those events can have certainty in their funding ready for the 1st of April, because some of those events may be at the beginning of the financial year. We have discussed together whether we could ask elected members of this committee to make a decision later in the financial year, i.e. the April committee. But the feedback we've had from events is that not knowing the answer and the outcome until into the financial year causes them significant challenges. And I appreciate the capacity and pressure that it may cause ourselves in terms of the assessment process, but from the Events Partnership's perspective, they've certainly fed back to us that we're comfortable in the approaches we've taken to date. What we can do is to look to review as we move through the cycles of the next year. The timing of when we bring this report, first of all, then determines the next knock-on stages. So there may be the option to look at bringing this first report even earlier in the cycle for the next year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that explanation. Thank you. Councillor Dashper.
Thanks for letting me back in, Chair. 2 more questions, if you'll permit me. What oversight do we have over applicants when they do events, and in terms of how they promote the event and give credit towards the council on social media and such? I know that the council's recently updated our logos, and we've got now special little supported by or funded by Dumfries and Galloway Council logos. Is that communicated to event organisers? And my second question, looking at page 27 at the top, organisations will be asked to undertake environmental management training in an effort to reduce the carbon footprint of the project. Could you just speak to that? Is this something that the council does in-house, or is this an external organisation that does the climate training? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So, yeah, in terms of the first point, within the service agreement that is written up the conditions of grant, there is clear stipulations of what is expected in terms of the recognition of the council as a funding partner, and that includes acknowledging and the use of our logos, and where appropriate the involvement of key councillors and quotes within any press activity. I'll just pass to my colleague Ian in relation to the environmental element, because this builds on the Greener Events Toolkit work that we had agreed previously.
Thank you. Exactly, yes. So the Council introduced Scotland's first Greener Events Toolkit last year, and training on the toolkit will be a part of the condition of the grant. So I'll lead on that with all the grant beneficiaries early in the new year after the grants are confirmed.
Yes, Councillor Dashper, you don't want to come back.
Yeah, thank you. Do you know what the uptake is for that training? I mean, how many of them are doing it when it's offered to them?
We did that on a voluntary basis this year with events organisations that had received funding through our Regional Events Growth Fund, and it was really good. On a voluntary basis, it was about 60 or 70% of the organisations. So there's a sort of, the practice has started, and it's about rolling it out further.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Chair, and congratulations on your new post. I'm looking at page 27 and then from that page 26, under part 7, the second bottom bullet point, the evidence of social inclusion will be taken into account when we score. Yet when you look at 5, what are the conditions? It's not one of the conditions. So how can we score it if it's not a condition?
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Ian, would you like to answer that one?
Yes. Thanks very much for picking up that discrepancy. If it's part of the criteria and the guidance, then it will be scored because there will be a question in the application form that directs directly to it.
Can I come back in? Thanks,
yes,
Chair. I think the point I'm making, Ian, is that unless it's a condition, we shouldn't really be scoring it. So we need to make it a condition. All I'm saying is move that bullet point, or most of the words in that second bottom bullet point on page 27, across to the bottom of page 26, so that everybody knows, right, when they're applying for it, that they need to take that into account. It's just a cross the T, dot the I exercise, I would suggest.
Thank you. Yes.
Noted. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. We'll ensure that that bullet point on number 7 is also included in section 5 within that criteria. Thank you.
Thank you. If we have no further comments, I will thank Lee and Ian for their assistance here today. Thank you. And we will move to recommendations. Members are asked to 1, agree, 2, agree, and 4, agree. Do we have agreement? Thank you. Recommendations 1 to 5, sorry. Agree 1, agree 2, agree 3, agree 4, and agree 5. Thank you. We will now move to item 5. The review of leisure arrangements report by the Executive Director of Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing. We have Lee Seaton is here to assist members if they have any questions. I will open up the meeting to members' debate. Thank you. Councillor Jamieson.
Yeah, thanks for letting me in. It's just a point of clarification. On page 45, the Short Life Working Group terms of reference, the membership, should the membership include the delivery partners? You know, if the ambition is to draft new standardised templates, it would be sensible to include the delivery partners in the working group, or at least have a consultation discussions with them, because while I accept that standardisation is a good thing, they'll have different specific needs and requirements. So I'm just wondering if either they should be included in that working group, or they're seriously given a voice in the discussions.
Thank you. Yes, Harry, you take that one.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reassure members that service users, either individual customers or organisations that use the facilities, are absolutely a key consideration. But I guess the best way to describe this phase is simply an internal exercise with a view to come back to members of this committee with recommendations for phase 2, which would very much involve engagement with customers, service users, organisations, etc. Because certainly whilst the benefits of standardisation is recognised, we certainly wouldn't want to have any unintended consequences in terms of disenfranchising customers, for example. So very much this exercise, internal and officer level, but with future impact of customers very much in mind. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah,
so Jamieson, did you want to come
yes,
back
thank
in?
you. Just a wee follow-up. No, I understand that, but having been involved in a lot of consultations and working groups in the past, do you not agree that it's really important that you consult with really important partners at as early stage as possible, even if it's only to get early indications of what their opinions, their requirements. It might save a bit of time. I mean, producing something for the members is fine, but the people that are actually involved very, very directly, maybe an initial discussion with them before it comes to the council might be informative. I don't know, but from my experience, it's really helpful.
Thank you. Yes, Harry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. Appropriate and early engagement will be absolutely critical, but I guess some of the work we're doing at the moment has been very much influenced by feedback we've had to date from service users and customers. So, for example, some of the agreements, we have existing agreements in leisure facilities. There's possibly grey areas about who's exactly responsible for what element of that particular delivery, and it's customers that have told us to try and get that definitively agreed would be very, very helpful. So, but absolutely, at the earliest opportunity, we will engage more with service users on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Julie Irving.
Thank you, Chair. It was just for clarification of what's meant. So on page 45, when it talks about the bottom bullet point, the review of leisure arrangements and the flagship facilities and applying what you learn there to the wider organisations. So how will this application of the review ensure equity with more rural locations? Will it be the exact same criteria that are used? Because the needs and the uptake of our leisure facilities in rural areas are different to our urban areas. So how will you decide if something is beneficial?
Thank you, Julie. Harry?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so the intention is to come up with guiding principles and a framework that still gives the degree of flexibility required to almost customise arrangements in particular sites. So, for example, without preempting any outcome, one of the areas that has been highlighted is that a lot of leisure facilities do children's birthday parties, for example, which are very much enjoyed by those that participate, but there's a different arrangement in each facility that perhaps asks for different information in a different format. So one of the standardisations that probably customers wouldn't even see an impact on, it's more of an administration exercise, would be to to have a consistent approach to that. But certainly to assure committee that this is not intended to negatively impact users at all, and there will be flexibility to ensure that local issues are very much taken into consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Harry. Councillor Young.
Thank you again, Chair. Still looking at page 45. First of all, a comment. In my opinion, the membership of the working group is heavily biased in favour of finance, governance, procurement, etc., with only one representative from leisure and well-being. But my question is, it's a short life working group. Surely frequency of meetings right at the bottom, you're meeting on a monthly basis, surely there should be an end date, or is it just going on and on and on? I would imagine a short life means they had to report back by a certain date. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, Harry?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, fully agree, Councillor Young. I chair the working group, and my intention is to get to a conclusion at the earliest appropriate opportunity, which I think will be a report back to this committee as early as possible next calendar year. And whilst the formal, if you like, meetings are a minimum of a monthly basis, I very much know that colleagues are out with the forums having daily discussion on particular issues, that the work isn't restricted to purely when we meet, but certainly the intention would be to come back to elected members of this committee at the earliest opportunity, which will be as early as possible next calendar year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does that help, Councillor Young?
It does. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Dorward.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much for the report. This issue was actually initiated by Councillor Sean Marshall almost a year ago at the now defunct Communities Committee. So it's a year on, and we've got a report on progress, which is great. And that's really good that things are going. And it's so good to see it being taken forward. It really needs to have a critical focus in terms of ensuring our flagship leisure centres continue to provide, to do the role of what they do, which is service to both our population and our region from a health promotion, reducing health inequalities perspective, and also to our economy when they host events. But they're also some of the biggest users of utilities for Dumfries and Galloway Council, and we know this. In these challenging financial times, we need to be maximising the return for the taxpayer. So this report is actually, at the right place at the right time, effectively. So the review of contractual legislative parameters regarding proactive arrangements is absolutely welcomed, as is the review of DGC governance regarding management processes. But as Councillor Young's mentioned, and you've answered this, Harry, and I know it's difficult, but I'm saying it was brought up a year ago. We're now ongoing, we've got monthly meetings, and you're saying that you're going to have a report as early as possible in the new year. Can we not have a date for that, please? Is there not so you can work back as a, I think that's a really reasonable request. I think as early as possible leaves it hanging. It's quite a woolly response. And a date would give you a chance to work back, and sort out processes. I think that we seem to be getting that quite a lot at the moment, and Chair, I would ask you to maybe reinforce that as Chair of this committee, because we seem to sometimes now be getting as early as possible, or there are no dates on some reports for reports coming back, for papers to meetings for reports coming back. So a date, I'm not expecting you to answer that right now, obviously, but a date would be useful to have a date so you can work back from that if that's achievable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dorward. And yes, it's a valid point. Harry, would you like to take that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Absolutely happy to give a firm, definitive date when we come back next to the committee with an update. I'm hesitating, preempting the outcome of the review to give a definitive date as to when it will all be completed. So I'm very happy to come back to committee early next calendar year. I'm trying to think of this, so there'll be a meeting in February. So yeah, come back with an update in February 2025. And just to give a little bit more background to members, at the moment, all the agreements of all varieties associated with the three flagship facilities are now with colleagues in legal services who have allocated the required resources to go through them. And they've absolutely given a commitment they'll do that as quickly as possible. Obviously, they need to do that as robustly as possible. So quite happy to come back if members would find that helpful in February and give an indication at that point as to when the whole exercise will be concluded. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Councillor Dorward. We'll put that as an action going forward. Thank you. Do we have any further comments? Councillor McGregor. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that I welcome the report. I think it's essential work that needs to be done. We've got a lot of arrangements in place with many organisations, so the three flagships as the starter is a good position to start from, and then we can look at others and ensure that we are getting the equity and fairness across all of our users of our own facilities. It's very clear in the report, the timelines. It went to committee in April. Progress reports come back in 6 months. So I think that assurance that it'll actually be 4 months would very much be welcome, but we need to get this work done and then ensure that we roll it out to the rest of our facilities.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. Just two things from me. One is that to ensure members actually have oversight of these agreements. We shouldn't really have any agreements in place that we can't see as councillors, so I think that's really important when it comes back. And also to ensure that clubs have the correct disclosures in place when they're using council facilities, and I'm going to keep banging on about that for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Yes, Harry, can you just clarify that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of disclosures and requirements, one of the areas that we will be looking at is consistency of what we expect users of facilities to have in place and to evidence that, and that's as much as keeping the organisation, users and ourselves safe. In terms of the detail of agreements, it's certainly something that the working group has discussed in terms of bringing that forward to members in the future. And the comment has certainly been made that there is likely to be some element of that could be deemed to be commercially sensitive, depending on what the contract or the agreement is and who the external provider is. So bearing that in mind, we would also obviously have to do the test that if something isn't deemed to be appropriate to be in the public domain for commercially sensitive reasons, we would always have to, but we think it's obviously valuable for members to have that information. That would have to be looked at from a governance perspective. But certainly we have now got all the detail we required, and we're just simply navigating through the range of agreements of all varieties that we've got. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Harry. Do we have any further comments? Thank you. We'd just like to wish the Short Life Working Group success and look forward to the report coming back in the new year. Thank you for your assistance here today to Lee and Harry. Thank you. We'll now move to recommendations. It's actually members are asked to note the progress to date of the Short Life Working Group and agree to receive a further report on the outcomes of this review to a further meeting of this committee. Thank you. We'll now move to item 6. This is the Framework for Inclusion, Learning Assistant Staffing Exercise for 2024 to 25, report by the Executive Director of Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing. We have Hugh Smith is here to assist if members have any questions. I will open up the meeting to members' debate. Thank you. Now, yes, Councillor Stitt. I'll give it first.
Thanks, Chair. It's in the bottom of page 48 where it said there was 11 presented at a review panel. Was any of them reviews, were they successful or is it still ongoing? Because I noticed in the wee chart thing further on the page here, it says that additionally. So were any of them successful or that it's just a continuation?
Thank you, Councillor. We've concluded the review panels. On top of my head, I think that we were able to resolve them all. And some of those have been, I'm not necessarily saying resolved to the satisfaction of all parties, but the review panel considered and made decisions. I think it was probably about a third that we agreed further allocation and the 2/3 that we didn't agree. But we also identified there were some individual circumstances that we needed to look at through our fortnightly review group, and just want to reassure members that we have a fortnightly additional allocation review group which sits, which considers any circumstances about individual children who have arrived in the region whose needs have significantly changed, and we use our contingency funding to do that. So we were able to draw a line effectively on the allocation process for this year, and now we've gone into business as normal, which is to undertake our fortnightly review meeting.
Councillor no, thanks for that, Hugh. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. I've asked before and it's never been brought back, but we need some sort of benchmarking with satisfaction in other areas and how we compare to them. And also I've asked before to bring back information on how other authorities carry out the application process to see if there's any other way that we can actually achieve this. So can the Chair and Vice Chair please make sure that comes on the agenda at some point in the near future? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. We'll put that as an action. Thank you. Councillor Jamieson.
Yeah, thanks for letting me in. There's a lot of work being gone into this, and I know that the Directorate and a lot of staff have been involved, as well as other, parents, teachers, etc., etc. But I'm referring to page 62, the implications and risk. My question is, and I'll clarify why I'm asking it, is can the director and the administration assure members and customers, i.e. children, parents, staff, that these implications and risks are within reasonable bounds? I'm not going to go through them all in detail, but I will touch them. Financial risk, it's stated in here that the service continues to be under significant financial pressure. That was mentioned, that was discussed at audit risk and scrutiny last year. The pressures have increased. There is no doubt about that, even with additional funding. And there's a tacit, well, there's an explicit acceptance that we're only looking after the most vulnerable. There's an explicit understanding and acceptance, sadly, that vulnerable people can't get the attention that they require. So the legal implications, the financial implications, short-term and more significantly long-term, are quite substantial. The implications of not intervention early, as we all agree, is really, really important. And children at levels 1, 2, 3 are not getting the attention that they require. So the implication of that is that they will need more assistance later on, or children come out of school not achieving what they could achieve. On the legal implications, last year the audit risk and scrutiny looked at additional support for learning. The key mitigation, as far as I can see it, and having discussed with the legal team, is that the support must be adequate and efficient and based on individual need. I don't think it is. I can be convinced otherwise, but I don't think it is, given that 75% of the money goes to stage 4 children and the rest largely at stage 3, so stage 2 and stage 1. And research tells us that children at stage 2 and 3 and 1 have got a significant opportunity to raise attainment, whereas stage 4 it's much more complex. So I think we're on thin ice in terms of legality, in terms of additional support for Learning Scotland Act 2004. Adequate and efficient, I don't think we could stand up to scrutiny, but again, I can be advised on that.
Thank you, Councillor Jamieson. Yes, Hugh, would you like to just take that? Thank you.
Pressed it twice, apologies. Councillor Jameson, I'd start by trying to unpick a little bit about the stages 1, 2, 3 and 4. We're not in any way suggesting that we're abandoning children with an additional support need at stage 1 or 2 or even 3. We're talking in this report about the allocation of learning assistance, which is one of many resources that we have in terms of being able to support children. And I think I've said at committee before, that at previous committee, that concerned sometimes that we see that this is a one option only. Our framework for our stages of intervention document clearly sets out the roles and responsibilities of all of our education staff in supporting all of our children at whatever stage, and we are adding and building on in terms of the support. So at stage 1, we are very clear that we would be expecting the class teacher to be identifying and supporting that child through some differentiated support. At stage 2, we would then be providing some support and assistance to that class teacher or the class teachers or the school in terms of advice and guidance. And my colleagues would be able to talk from educational psychology about all the work that they do in building the capacity and working and supporting schools around individual planning for children. And it's only at stage 3 where the support starts, where we start to look at supports including learning assistance. It was interesting, I was surprised about the 75% of our learning assistant, which, as I say, is only one part, a significant part of our resources being targeted at stage 4 children. I actually went back about 7 years and actually we'd done some research on that, and it's not a different figure. Most of our learning assistants are supporting and have been supporting our children with the most complex needs, and it is the other resource, the nearly £20 million that we spend on additional support, which is part of the whole support that's available for all of education. Only half of that is learning assistance. We have teachers, we have other SJC staff that are working in schools, supporting children and supporting staff and supporting families. So I don't think that the sole focus on learning assistance as whether we're meeting our duties is accurate. And I would say, and Councillor Stevenson's question about what's happening elsewhere, this is how we all do it in Scotland. It's a number of different options and supports and range that are available for children at different circumstances and needs. I agree that we would be wanting to invest early and much earlier in terms of intervention, and we have some wonderful examples of that across our schools and our nurseries. But at the same time, we also have a responsibility for our children that are with the greatest need, and trying to stretch the resource across all of that is the challenge, and that's why in recent years we have started to use stages of intervention to give us a clearer framework to be able to make decisions about resources. But in terms of the position as to whether we are out with statute, that generally comes from challenge, and we have a very clear, in Scotland, an escalated, robust process that ultimately leads us to the first tier tribunal, and we are, I have to say, you know, in terms of when I speak to my colleagues across Scotland, we don't see that level of challenge in terms of the supports that are available. Granted, we know, and all members in this room will know, that they'll have individual circumstances where families or schools are coming to them and talking about individual children. And again, we have processes in place to be able to pull together resource to escalate in terms of whether we need to do something different. And that's the system that we've got in place. And I'm not saying it works perfectly. We have over nearly 3,000 children at stage 3 and stage 4. We now have over 8,000 children identified as having a stage. It's complex and it's challenging, but we continue to work with the resources that we have, which members have given us, to be able to be the most effective that we can do in terms of meeting our statutory needs. Sorry if that was a bit long-winded, Chair. Apologies.
No, that was a good explanation. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Jameson, has that helped?
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. And none of that's new to me. And I would contend that we're not delivering what we should be delivering. I know the budget's stretched. I know the challenges you've got. It's not a criticism of the staff or anything. But I'll go on to the risk and the risk and implications on the workforce. And I totally agree that assisted support needs is not just about LAs, it's about much more than that. But on the workforce, as is written in the paper, staff morale and motivation is impacted when colleagues no longer feel able to meet all the needs of the children and young people they're working with by having a focus on those with the most need. The inability to prioritise early intervention and prevention needs can escalate. I'll say they do escalate. I can refer to the teacher's rep, but feedback we get from schools is that it doesn't concur with what you're saying, Hugh. Things are not working. Either we need more budget, or we need more resources, or we will face a huge impact on finance, workforce morale, legal implications. So really, what we would ask is that the impact assessment, it states here that the proposal does not propose a change in policy, the formal adoption of a land policy or strategy, or propose a service change. Well, I would challenge that, and I may be wrong, but there seems to be, we've had a review, and we've had a change. We've had a change in allocation, a change in moderation, a change in staff, and there's a lot of implications there. So even if the proposal doesn't meet the recommendations as per governance, I would suggest that this is serious enough to have an impact assessment just as soon as possible. What is the impact of the financial pressures, the inability to look after other than the most vulnerable? Feedback from teachers is that they can't do their job as well as they would like. They can do a job, but not as well as they like. I'll leave it there. What I would like to see, what our group would like to see, is an impact assessment, because this affects not just learning assistants, it affects the whole school environment and outcomes for children and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson. That's, I think we can leave it at that for the moment. Thank you. But we do appreciate everything you've said, and I think we all
I would like
agree
to
with
discuss
everything.
further whether or not we need an impact assessment. That's a request. Sorry, Andy.
Thank you.
Would you like me to come in?
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a new policy or strategy. Clearly, budget, you mentioned yourself, Councillor Jimison, that this is a budget matter and you would be looking to consider the resource available. I thank you for the detailed, comprehensive review that you gave to you there. And I think important to benchmark the tribunals. I mean, your view or a view that we're not meeting young people's needs. Perhaps the outcome of tribunals would be by way of evidence for that. In terms of impact assessment, that's not what this paper is here for. This paper is here to consider the progress made in the allocation of learning assistance and to note some of the improvement priorities. And I know a priority for this committee has been around the contractual situation with our very important workforce in terms of our learning assistance, and we can see in section 4.9 the deployment of our staff and the approach we've taken to use a greater amount of permanent contracts. I think that's a really positive move forward in valuing this workforce and ensuring that they have the training and support that they require as permanent members of staff. And I do commend the work of the team in working towards that significant exercise to move the vast majority of our staff onto permanent contracts. So thank you for that. I do take the point that there are risks in not meeting children's needs, but perhaps there are other ways of assuring the committee of that than an impact assessment at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Julie Irving.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to direct your attention to page 48, so 4.3. It talks about learning assistant hours not being allocated to individual children, but hours are allocated to schools, and head teachers can then use that at their discretion. So how are we meeting the needs of learners who we've identified with additional support needs if head teachers are allocating on the basis of most need in their schools? As a classroom practitioner, as a class teacher, I know that the children who cause the most disruption, so those children displaying distressed behaviours, are the children who get the most support, because they're the ones who are clearly distressed, clearly needing support at that time. But then you've got other children in the class who are classed. Now, some of these children with distressed behaviours, I would refer you onto the slide on page, let me get this page right. No, it's not a slide. It's page 65, where you categorise stage 3 behaviours. Dangerous risk-taking behaviour, so it's the 4th bullet point down. For example, absconding out with school premises, giving rise to risk, climbing, hitting glass, accessing unsuitable objects, i.e. knives, scissors, etc. Racism, sexualised behaviour, threat of weapons. That's stage 3. With what you've said today at committee, our stage 4 children are the ones getting support. We have children at stage 3 displaying those behaviour. So sometimes what happens is the support is then taken from stage 4 children to these children who display this dangerous, risk-taking behaviour. You may have the situation, if you're in a full class of 33 pupils, we know it's about 10% of pupils with additional needs. You may have 2 or 3, if you're lucky, children who are displaying distressed behaviour. You may have 1 support assistant. Generally, what happens is if one child is distressed, depending on the needs of the rest of the class, other children then become distressed. You have 2 adults in that room, 33 children, 3 or 4 children displaying distressed behaviour. It's impossible to teach in that situation. And I am speaking from personal experience, but I've also had a lot of teachers contact me since the start of term saying they are struggling to teach because all we are doing is managing distressed behaviour as best we can with the resources we have. But the resources are limited. We don't have enough staff to help us support these children displaying distressed behaviours. It's not the child's fault they're displaying distressed behaviours. As teachers, we want to help them. We want to get them in education, enjoying our classrooms, enjoying learning, enjoying schools. But their behaviour has a knock-on impact on how we can teach, on when we can teach, on what we can teach, and therefore attainment. So there's several issues within there. But if we are saying our head teachers are allocating where the most need is, it's going to the children displaying distressed behaviours. So how on earth can we meet the needs of these children?
Thank you, Julie, for sharing your experiences with us. Would you like to take that, Hugh? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And please, Julie, you know we've had conversations before. Don't underestimate the challenges, and we have reported to the previous iteration of this committee in terms of we are at the heart of a storm in terms of the challenges post-COVID, in terms of the cost of living crisis. We have seen the behaviours in school and the increase in distressed behaviours from nursery onwards. I suppose for me, as I would be saying, as you rightly said, the resources falling where the need is greatest, and at that point in that time, that child that is distressed and the reasons and understanding of those reasons is where that resource needs to be. Don't underestimate the challenges that then creates in terms of being able to teach for the rest of the class. I suppose I would just want to, reassure members that this is the recent COSLA Scottish Government action plan in terms of behaviours in schools has recognised and highlighted the fact that we are at the heart of this storm at the moment in terms of dysregulated, distressed, violent and aggressive behaviour is the phrase that has been used within that document, and that we need to reinforce our approach, which is a Dumfries and Galloway part of our framework for inclusion, about relationships within our schools and shifting the focus in terms of how we engage and support children, but also recognising that we need to be able to resource supports for some of those children that we're seeing with the most distressed behaviours. My expectation will be that we'll be coming back to committee. We've got the action plan, the national action plan in terms of those behaviours and how we manage that, and looking at alternative offers and shifting the curriculum around. And we will be coming back, well, we will be developing through my distress behaviours group a local action plan, which I think we would probably want to report here in terms of, because I guess for us it is going to be about what are the resource implications in terms of alternative provision. Our current provision is pretty much under pressure, but also the capacity and availability of resource to be able to support some of these children within setting. Don't disagree with what you're saying, Julie, in terms of the complexity of and the number of children that we're seeing with those really dysregulated and behaviours that are having an impact on everybody, including themselves. And absolutely welcome your point that this is about how we support them, but at the same time, you're right, there is that concern that we are having to pull the resource to support those children because of immediate risk, and actually some of our other children that would benefit and that require that support are maybe getting a lesser deal. So I suppose, Chair, what I would say is that's recognised nationally. The action plan is a national action plan, but we are locally looking at that with our partners, including our unions, in terms of what this means for our plan going forwards in terms of how we manage distressed and distressing behaviours within Dumfries and Galloway.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, Julie. Thank you. Councillor Hill.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me in, Chair. I think Julie's touched on a lot of what I was going to bring up, and I think that a lot of it does relate to the financial impacts, page 50 and page 51, staff morale. And it's good to hear Hugh say there that there is going to be a national look at these distressing behaviours, because perhaps it's not support for learners that necessarily need to be taking this on board. Perhaps the directorate needs to be looking at another team with different training, because I understand a lot of training has been taken on board, and I welcome 4.9, as the director stated. You know, a lot of these contracts have been made permanent, which is fantastic news. Something that I've asked for, which you'll know there, Gillian. It's great to see that coming to fruition now. I kind of feel that the staff morale is a big thing for me, and I think that if we have support for learners working in situations where they're not fully aware of these difficulties that some of the children may be displaying, that the morale will go down. And with teachers, as Julie mentioned, you know, how can a teacher teach a class if all of this is going on, and what's the impact on the attainment for the other children within that class? So it's welcome to hear Hugh say that it is going to be looked at, but a potential, with the budget coming up and the consultation of the budget, this is possibly something that the Education Directorate need to be saying to all political groups, that this is a real big focus, and we need to be looking at finding some sort of resources to put into the budget to address these issues, and potentially have a smaller group across Dumfries and Galloway working with these children who are displaying these behaviours with the correct training in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Did you have a question in there, or just a comment?
I think Hugh had answered most of the questions in Julie's comments, but it was just on the back of that, whether that's possible. I don't know if you could come back in and say whether it's possible to look at, you know, a team within the working group that is working with of people that have qualifications with looking after children who are expressing these behaviours and these traumas. I know there's the team teach training, which it was different, but you know, there may be some additional training that we could look at to a smaller group to address this, not necessarily just the support for learners who are dealing with, you know, some of the most complex children that we have, but also some of the children that we have expressing behaviours that potentially some of them might not have seen before.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. I think that's for a further meeting, I think. Thank you. Councillor Young.
Thank you for letting me back in, Chair, and thank you, Hugh, for these papers. I'm not quite sure if this question fits this agenda item, but here goes. Obviously, we're talking about level 3, level 4 children, but I'm wondering what happens next. There's no level 5, and on Tuesday at the social work meeting, we learned of the horrendous cost, £7.8 million to look after people out with the region. Now, if these people are school-age people being looked after within our region, that would be a factor in the education budget. I'm just wondering, and I don't expect a clear definition, when does a school-age youngster stop being the responsibility of the education department and start becoming the responsibility of the social work department? And if that happens, does the education department finance part of the social work costs in looking after a youngster of school age? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Yes, Hugh?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Young. The responsibility never goes away for us, and in fact, the residential budget that is a split between, it's a contribution from education and from social work, which now, over time, when changes in terms of directorate has sat with social work, but we in the Education Directorate effectively have a 40% responsibility for any unspend. We'd like to think that, but generally for the overspend. So we continue to have responsibility for all of those children and young people in residential placements out of region, and our educational psychology service would be the key educational link in terms of checking the suitability, at times as well the availability of education provision for some of our young people.
Thank you, Hugh. Does that answer your question, Councillor Young?
It answers most of it. Can I ask you a supplementary? So, obviously, in the social work funding, 7.8 million to look after 28 persons. Does the education contribution, is that on top of that 7.8 million, or is that part of it?
That's part of it, Councillor Young.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me back in. It was a couple of questions about the slides. So it's page 58 and page 59. So you talk about the scrutiny of the CMIS data. So you said that you looked specifically at preschool data. So within preschools, our early learning and childcare settings have a ratio of 1:8 for children. In school and primary 1, that ratio is 1:25. So by the very nature of it, children who present in preschool settings, like our school nurseries, have a lot more adults in the room anyway. and some of these children are allocated support when they're in preschool. However, when they move into primary 1, they're less likely to be allocated a level 4 than a level 3 because they're moving into school. But the ratios are different, so do you recognise that there's actually a major impact there, and that's a discrepancy because it skews the levels? Because they've had all these extra adults in the room with them in nursery, they're able to share the care for that child. As a very experienced nursery teacher, I know very well how that worked when I worked in nursery. But in school, when it's yourself and your new starts, that's quite tricky. Now, I know in some schools they've been able to use their PEF funding to support that. I know in some schools, when they looked at allocation of support and where the need is, they're able to support those P1s coming in. But we're at the stage in the majority of schools where our children with distressed behaviours are the ones needing the support. So is that taken into consideration when you're looking at the levels for primary 1? So that's my kind of first question there. The second one is on page 59, the application of the formula. It says agreed fixed hours for children with needs met at stage 4 in mainstream. What are those fixed hours? Because I thought the allocation was not specific to individual learners. So it's just a point of clarity there. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Hugh?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the first part, and I have to say, we recognise we have some issues in terms of information transferring from nursery into primary 1, and particularly with a third of our children in partner providers, and sometimes the tracking of children where they end up is quite complex, and that has led to us have to redraft allocations for individual settings a number of times. Our education visitor service is really the driver in terms of being able to, if you're a child in a nursery, you should be known by our EV service if you're at a stage 4 level, and actually they would then be working with the nursery and with us in terms of making sure that we've understood those needs. Your point about supports in nursery, I think that, I suppose what I would say is there has been significant investment over the last 18 months in terms of building the capacity of our nursery colleagues to be able to support children and to be able to support the post-COVID children that we're seeing, which we recognise, I think, are coming in as less ready for nursery as we would have expected, and the knock-on effect has been they're less ready for primary. So I suppose what I would say is that we have had to augment their resourcing with staff to be able to get them through this period where actually they're probably not as able to manage some of those needs that we would hope that they would be able to. So I suppose what I'm trying to say, Julie, is that I think we have a better system in terms of being able to recognise those children coming into primary 1, and they are included in the allocation. So though that they're not that they're not coming through some of the usual draw-through information, we're using our EVs to make sure and double-check, and then we're tracking those children into primary, and they should be assessed as part of all of our children in our primary and secondaries in terms of what level of need they are. Circumstances, I have to say, the reality is that need can be site-specific. We know one of the 4 reasons for an additional support need is environment, is the school environment and the nursery environment. So we know that, you know, it always doesn't amaze me anymore, but a child that we can move from one setting where we're seeing very distressed behaviours and all sorts of things going on, and we can move them into a different setting, and actually they can just, they almost disappear from the radar. And in fact, last week we had a head teacher that said, that's those 16 hours that you've allocated for us to be able to support the transition of this child into their school, you can have them back because it's worked so well. Whereas the supports that were needing to be available to them in the other school were significant. Now, I know your point that you said, but we don't allocate to individual children, and we're allocating on the basis of you've reached the level of a stage of intervention, and therefore there is a certain amount of hours that would be available for that child, which then goes into the pot, which then goes to the school. So for our general allocation, apologies if I'm maybe losing colleagues here, but for the general allocation, we are basically using the next stage of intervention as an indicator of the level of hours that should be be part of the hours that go to that school. And as we've talked earlier, then those hours become for the head teacher to make decisions about where to allocate them. Does that make sense on that bit? Your second point, sorry, and I've...
Sorry, Hugh, can I just come in? You've said about if they're stage 4, they're known to the educational visitor service.
They should be. I'm not
but
saying
the
that
educational visitor service is an opt-in service, so parents can refuse referrals. So we're seeing numbers of children coming into primary 1 who are not necessarily known to the EV service because parents didn't want their children referred. So now we're trying to pick them up in primary 1, but because they're not known to you, we've not been allocated support hours, therefore we're getting more distressed behaviours in our classrooms. And so that's really important for members to know, that not every child who has been recognised by nursery staff as having significant additional needs is actually on an EV's radar, because it's an opt-in service, a bit like speech and language therapy, a bit like occupational therapy.
Thank you, Julie. Hugh, did you want to take this up?
Sorry, Chair, would that be all right? Sorry, just briefly. I take your point, and we also have children that don't go to nursery and they just rock up at primary 1, and then that again is where our systems, in terms of our fortnightly panel, where a school can make an application for additional hours. That's the point of that process, because we recognise that tracking all of our children, and we've got the most complex tracking process now, which we hope will set us up for the future. Children are just where we think they are a month later. A number of them are going into very different directions, and then the start of August, or start of school in August, they're in different places again. So it is the fluidity of choice is one of the factors that makes it difficult.
Thank you, Hugh. Does that help, Julie? And you want to take this up further with Hugh offline?
I think I probably need to have a conversation with Hugh offline, because I appreciate members' time. It is very complex, but I think there's no way about it. We are struggling in schools. And even when we do get our environments right, so when you involve the de-escalation team, the nurture team, every team you can think of, we've had through our classroom doors. We've had reports left, right and centre, and we're still not getting it right for some children. And it's frustrating on a professional level, because you desperately want to get it right for these children. You want them in your class. You want them happy and settled and able to learn. And it's so frustrating as a teacher when you feel you can't do that because there's something not quite right. So I would really appreciate the opportunity to speak offline. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much. I suppose it's a privilege coming last. Most of what I want to say has been said by others. I'll try and be as brief as I can here. If you go to 4.3, if the resource group actually make a recommendation, then that's saying there that the head teacher then has to make a decision based on what resources they have available. That, to me, is an unhealthy burden on that head teacher for a start. It's also could mean that the resource group's recommendations for children could be changed, because the resources are finite, they're not infinite. So where do we go with that? I've got a wee roadmap here, I'll try and work my way through it. For me, if you just go in there for the kind of question, it's brought up here at the decision for stage 4 and some stage 3. The question is it legal? There is one reference in here, at 6 on page 50, that it doesn't account, the Act does not account for budget constraints. Okay, so if a child is assessed, the child's assessed and they have a need, and that is a statutory requirement of this council to meet that need. That's my reading of that, and I think that's what came out of the Audit and Risk Committee. So the question here would be, just to marry that 4.3 with that, and I think Julie described it very, very well. If you've got a class with 20 kids, and you've got one who's at stage 4, maybe one at stage 3, you could have 4 or 5 at stage 2. Right? But then that means there's 14 or 15 with the 20 who are actually potentially left floundering. Now, despite the best intention of the teachers and everyone else, if all their time is taken up with disruption, and I would suggest, I mean, Hugh and I go back a long time in this, smile there, when you're, please don't take this the wrong way, but the level 4 and to a certain extent the stage 3 children are probably less of a problem to the well-being of the whole class than the level 2s who are in there maybe for temporary time. One often used one is if there's been a death in the family, for example, a sibling or something like that, the kids can become very disruptive, and that disrupts the whole class. So I think when we take it in here, and I think, to be fair to Julie, she's recognising, and Hugh obviously recognises, that this is extremely complex. We're not properly resourced here, is my suggestion, because if the Act is right, well, it is right, that it doesn't matter what the budgetary constraint is we should be supporting that child, whatever. So the question really for me is, how do we then increase the budget? Because let's talk money, because this bottom line, this is what this is about. It's about how we got the budget, and A, and then B, how we got the staff and resources to then follow through what needs to be done. How do we do that? And I'm just kind of going back a wee bit in my mind here, and I think it was one of the latter things, it was that discussion between Julie and Hugh, and it was about early years and the change from early years up into primary school and that uncertainty in certain settings. What it was is, where's the intervention at that time? And I think Julie, if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think she was actually saying is that we need to put some sort of resource in there so we identify much, much earlier, so that we know, because we, it was always kind of said, wasn't it, that the first people who will know that there's a developmental issue with a child is mum and the health visitor. Okay, so that brings me to my last point, if I could, Chair, and that's at 414. Why are the NHS not being told to get there? Because they've signed up to this, right? And they've got services they use, because, yeah, I think we need to do something with that. We need to write to the NHS and say that somebody needs to be attending these groups, because there's a seat at the table there, because they're major players. Right? They need to take their responsibility. It's okay going to the community planning partnership and signing up for something, but then they need to match that reaction. And if they're not even coming to the meeting where we're deciding what kind of care a child or support a child is needing, then they're failing, and we need to be quite blunt with them about that. And I think that probably, I think there's probably enough there, and I'm not that sure there's a question, Hugh. I think it's more a statement about here. It's kind of to support you, right, because you've got a difficult job here. But as a group of councillors, and I'm talking about the whole council, we need to do something about the resources. That's my view, and I don't know what the rest think about that. So for me, just to finish, on page 67, for example, they tell us a lot about stage 4 and stage 3 children, and that's bad enough. But if we had the same information on the stage 2 children, it would be eye-watering, the resources that were required. And that's only the ones who have been assessed. And we're still getting fresh assessments coming in post-COVID. So this is only going to get worse. So I don't know how the director takes this forward, but we really should be looking at budget terms, how the statutory budget that the education service gets in this part. Okay, sorry. That's off the soapbox.
No, thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Director, would you like to take that?
Thank you very much, members. I think we all want to meet our children's needs, and you highlighted that this is, in your view, a resource issue, and I'm aware that members are considering their budget at the moment as we reach the budget decisions that this council will take as we move towards February. Money's not always the answer. It's about having the right money in the right place and the right staff in the right place with the right training and the right partners. And certainly I know how hard it is to meet everyone's expectation as in what we've all agreed today is a really complex and changing landscape with the budget constraints that all councils and all public sectors are facing at the moment. So certainly we are doing what we can, and your oversight and scrutiny is welcomed as we come forward with budget proposals. Certainly we do have evidence. We've got evidence of what works across Scotland, and that we are trying to, for example, the example I gave earlier about our learning assistance training, the example that the Scottish Government have identified in terms of the training programmes for learning assistants and the qualifications for learning assistants. It's all part of that professionalisation of all staff in schools. It's not just teachers, it's not just learning assistants, but it's all staff in schools and, as you mentioned, the wider directorate who can support us in this. So I look forward to budget discussions as we come forward over the next 4 months.
Thank you, Director. Does that help Councillor Ferguson for going forward or not?
It doesn't help really, but it's a massive task to take this forward. And I think the point I'm really trying to make here is we've got a corporate risk that the council needs to face up to, and it really needs to address. And if you look at corporate risk, I think, just off the top of my head, something like 4,000 or 5,000 level 3 and 4 children, and then you add in X thousand of level 2 children, that's effectively 12,000, 15,000 opportunities for judicial review for this council to be held to task because they're not meeting the statutory obligations. And that's how it should be viewed. Right? We really need to get a grip on this, and we really need to look as a council about what is absolutely necessary. And when the Act says that, and our lawyers say that, and our Audit and Risk Committee came back with that recommendation, is we should be paying attention to that.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I think it's a problem throughout the country, just getting staff, not even over the resources as well. Yes, Hugh, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose wanted to just highlight that most national events I go to, we all talk about 50% of our children in the next 5-6 years being identified with additional support need. So I think that we're chasing a solution that actually we have a wider solution, which is Framework for Inclusion, which is about shifting the emphasis and in terms of the model and the offer in terms of our schools. And it may be helpful to bring something back on that at some point, Jim, just to be able to update members in terms of progress on that, because this isn't just what we're talking about here with learning assistance is within the context of a much larger change programme, which is absolutely reflected from what Morgan identified in the Morgan report, Angela Morgan identified, which is that we need a fundamental shift in the way that we do our business in our schools, because actually it will be 1 in 2 children with an additional support need within 5 or 6 years.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Ferguson.
Fundamental shift means changing the goalposts. Let's be blunt, because at the end of the day, the issue is getting worse. The money situation is getting worse. This really comes down to how this council views looking after our children to the best way we can. And that's what I'm saying here, is we really need to look at the budget setting process about how much we allocate to Gillian and Gillian's team to deal with additional support for learning. It's absolutely crucial. And Hugh's right. I mean, the goalposts have changed every year from time immemorial, you know. But it's how we deal with that is the $64,000 question. And we need to be seen at least trying. And I think that's where I'm coming from in this. Well, I know that's where I'm coming from in this.
I fully appreciate that, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy for the discussion to be offline between Julie and Hugh, but can we get oversight of it as members? You know, as it's been suggested, it's us that have the budget strings sometimes. But yeah, if we could see that, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Julie, did you want to come back in?
Yes, I wanted to come back in just to offer some reassurance about level 1s and 2s. Because as a classroom teacher, if the support is right for my level 3 and level 4 children, I can meet the needs of level 1 and 2 in my class. I'm a skilled teacher, I know what I'm doing, I've oodles of training, and actually to be able to meet the needs of children who have dyslexia or, you know, other additional needs, I can do that on my own, but only if my level 3s and 4s have the right support. So inclusion does work, but it takes funding, it takes different training, which, as I say, with my years of experience, I've got. So it was to reassure members that if we can get the support right for those higher tariff children, then your class teacher is more than capable of getting support for level 1 and 2.
Thank you, Julie. Mr. Black?
Yeah, thanks very much, and a really interesting and informative discussion. I think especially Julie's interventions there, and I would second that. That yeah, any discussions that are taken offline, I think the outcome, I think we'd all be interested in those. I think this is an area that I think parents find difficult to understand. So through the Dumfries and Galloway Parent Council Forum, this has been raised a couple of times that parents are just not sufficiently in the loop with this, and that includes parents that their children may use this service and parents that do not. They know that there's budget issues, they know that there's resource constraints, but they don't know what the impact of that is, what the outcomes are. Things like it's not necessarily a number of hours per a certain child, and that carries on every year. I don't think things like that are understood. So I think we have commitment from Vanessa Morris, one of the education support officers, to share some infographics and things. I think that's been produced before by the council, the education service, but I think that needs to be an annual kind of campaign to kind of upskill parents in this, because obviously memories fade over the summer and as kids grow up. So I think those are my kind of 2 points. I think the only remaining question I think I had, because others have covered most of the issues, I'm really worried about this inconsistency. You know, we talk about 71% of head teachers, disagreed with the allowance. There is a lack of detail about that might have been small. I don't know the significance of that, whether you were completely miles apart or not. So I can't make a judgment on that. But we talk about as well on page 62. It talks about need for a better shared understanding. I think that really worries me. I know that in 4.8 it talks about one of the improvement priorities is to improve consistency. But I'm just wondering, is there any firm ideas on how we improve consistency? Because what I struggle to grasp is that if 71% of head teachers are disagreeing with the original allocation, but then when the allocation is finally resolved and applied to the school, then it's for the head teacher to allocate that. So if there's inconsistency there and a lack of shared understanding, but then ultimately they're the people that distribute whatever allowance they get, that just really concerns me. So I think I'm just after is there any firm ways of improving that consistency between head teachers and council staff? Thank you.
Thank you. Hugh, would you like to take that? Thank you.
Thank you. I'd want to offer reassurance that absolutely in terms of that consistency, it was one of our biggest concerns. And we know that environment-specific, site-specific, people-specific is a factor. But in terms of what we're doing is, as the director has referred to, the professional learning, the improvement in terms of all the access and opportunities, as Julie's talked about, that she's had over many years, in terms of being able to upskill everybody to a level to be able to understand what's the child in front of them and what their needs are and how best to meet them, but also to know when to need to seek additional support or advice and guidance. We've used moderation over the last 2 years, but we'd like to spend more time on that. I have to say that, and it's not a whine, please forgive me, but the actual physical allocation process takes so much of our time. We closed down this year's allocation just in the first few weeks of this term. we spend a lot of our time actually just doing a process of distributing resource, which generally leaves everybody dissatisfied anyway, so then we have to enter into individual negotiations. So we want to spend much more time on being able to be out in schools, supporting moderation between schools, bringing different schools together and head teachers to understand and other practitioners, but also quality assuring. Quality assuring in terms of the understanding and assessment of need, but also the interventions and the supports that are in place. We know that our learning assistants in different settings have very different roles and responsibilities. And again, that some are taking an enormous amount of responsibility in terms of supporting very complex children and dealing and being the first response to a child, that not the first, but is the adult that's there when that child's distressed and is maybe lashing out to communicate that distress. And other learning assistants will be doing a very different role. So again, that consistency in terms of role and responsibilities, but key for us is the quality assurance, moderation. That hopefully reassures. But I take very much your point in terms of we need to constantly, repeatedly, because our parents are changing constantly and repeatedly as well. We need to keep giving the messages out. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. I think most of what I was going to say has been covered. But as a parent and a member of the Parent Council, I'm aware of the challenges faced in our schools, but can I just thank Julie for highlighting what is going on in the classroom. It is absolutely important that we hear from her. It's not something we get in our reports. So I just ask her to continue bringing these issues to committee, because we absolutely do need to start getting it right for every child. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Jamieson.
Yeah, just briefly to touch on what you touched on about consistency, and I totally agree. One of the key elements of Angela Morgan's report was about consistency and teamwork. And we've had this discussion before about the annual turnaround to try and ensure fairness and consistency. But one of the benefits of leaving well alone is that teachers and learning assistants and parents can develop that consistency and sense of teamwork. I know it's quite difficult because circumstances change, but I think it's something that we've not got right yet. I think you would agree with that, because schools are unhappy with the allocation process. So maybe we can look again at that allocation process to at times just leave well alone and have a role for short-term changes, etc., rather than annually, because we know from experience that if a learning assistant and a teacher and parents and children work together and build confidence, then that improves outcomes for everybody. And where we get disruption, and sadly you're at the forefront of this, is when things are changed and you get learning assistants, teachers, parents, everybody throwing everything at us. So if we can develop a system where that consistency, which will deliver teamwork and outcomes for the children, if we can find a solution to that, I think that would be a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Councillor Jamieson. Did you want to just come back on that?
I absolutely take Councillor Jameson's point, and I suppose it's that balance. This year, the shifting across to more permanent posts created more movement than we would normally expect. We're now in the position where actually we've got permanent posts, and we would hope that there's less movement required. But ultimately, the challenge is that when children's needs move and change, and they move from nursery to primary to secondary, there is always a balancing in terms of being able to move resource. But it is a challenge, because I absolutely agree with Councillor Jameson. The more consistency that staff and colleagues can have working as a team, the better the outcome will be for children. But it's balancing the needs in terms of being able to have some fluidity to be able to make sure that needs are being met wherever the children are.
Thank you, Hugh. Councillor Ferguson, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, just very, very quickly, Chair, for a bit of clarity. Is Julie's meeting with Hugh as a member of this committee or as a teacher's rep? Because the sharing of that information in that meeting might be difficult if she's going to do it as a teacher's rep. Just a bit of clarity, what is the meeting?
Thank you. Yes, Director.
I think in the first instance it would be important if there was particular points on the slides that you didn't feel were accurate, Julie. I think that would simply be a point of clarification if what operates in schools, you have a view as a teacher and as a teacher representative that we've not adequately referred to in the presentation. I think that would be quite a straightforward matter. If there were more issues, for example, on there is trade union representation on the behaviour working group, distress behaviour working group. We do have regular papers to the LNCT on this matter, and I know that this is a separate arrangement, Julie. You're not an LNCT representative, but you're a teacher representative. So I think it's important we do clarify that. So if we take the first point regarding the 2 points on the presentation, as we take that all offline to develop a shared understanding of what those 2 bullet points were, and then if there are further specific points, then that would be a matter for this committee, I would suggest.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thanks. You mentioned the LNCT there, but you didn't mention the other trade unions where the learning assistants tend to be rather than the teachers' union. So how do we include them in the process?
Absolutely, and I know they're also. Hugh, would you like to overview that?
John Thin chairs the non-teaching trade union group, which meets regularly, which considers issues in terms for non-teachers, but also non-teachers are represented on the distress and distressing behaviours group.
Thank you. If we have no further comments, we'll just move to recommendations, and thank you and Jim for their assistance here today. Thank you. We are asked to consider the progress made in the allocation of learning assistants across Dumfries and Galloway for the academic year 2024 to 25, and to note the continuing improvement priorities in relation to the annual learning assistant allocation and staffing exercise as set out at paragraph 4.8. We'll move on to item 7, which is the Pupil Equity Fund report by the Executive Director of Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing. We have Karen Bryden and Susan Martin are here to assist if members have any questions. Thank you. I'll now open up the meeting to members' debate. Thank you. Councillor Dashburn.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I think this is before us because I might have asked for it at the last committee, so that's good, thanks. It looks like there's quite a lot of underspends in the schools. Yeah, I don't want to assume the reasons why, but I'm not really sure what the reasons why are in the report. So could you just speak to that and just give us some clarity about why schools aren't fully utilising their own funds? I do realise it's a head teacher decision, and I don't know what oversight the directorate has over that. So just some clarity, thanks.
Thank you. Susan, would you like to take that forward?
Thank you, Chair. So the reasons are many and varied for underspends. I think it's wise to say, and the detail around that will be very different in every setting. However, there are some themes around that which I'm happy to explain and share to committee. So the first one is around 50% of the funding each year that goes direct to schools for pupil equity funding is spent on staffing. And therefore, the budget, the Pupil Equity Fund budget, is responsible for the full costs of those staff that are employed using that budget. That includes holiday pay, pension contributions, etc., etc. Now, we have a ready reckoner for schools to use that gives an indicative amount, but that varies according to the individual. And therefore, sometimes schools are prudent in their planning and set aside money to cover those costs that perhaps aren't as high as what they expected. So that's one aspect of a staffing cost. The other one is around recruitment. And we know that we have recruitment challenges right across the region in all posts. So when schools go out to recruit, they work really hard in term 4 to plan for the new term in term 1. And normally there might be a bit of a lag there at the start of the new term, but usually fairly small. But where there are either absences or people leaving and moving on during the school year, kicks off a new recruitment process. And sometimes filling these vacancies can take up to 12 weeks. And when you're talking about staff salaries, that very quickly amounts to a substantial amount of money that the school has not then spent on what they had planned to spend it on. The ability for them to carry that forward within the funding into next year's funding means that they can then ensure some continuity of approach for the young people that they're trying to support. So I think the ability to carry forward that money is really important. And I would also note for members that it's as 2.2% of the overall budget is sitting in unspent balances. So that's actually fairly small in a budget in excess of 3 million. However, nevertheless, we want to get that money spent on the children in school in the current year. So in the main, it's about staffing costs. We run the cost right through to August, as you can see from the paperwork that we've shared with you, in order to capture things that have come in over the school holidays, but also the activity in school holidays that many schools help to fund to support families while school's not open. So sometimes there is still a bit of a lag, and sometimes there are things that haven't just quite hit the budget. So although it's not spent through the ledgers, it may well be committed. And we don't have a mechanism to capture that in detail at this point in the year. However, given that the balances are in the main fairly small, if that's committed expenditure and the school can carry forward the money, they can then utilise that in order to pay off those commitments in the coming year. Hopefully that gives a bit of an insight into the sort of headlines of why there are some underspends.
That's a really comprehensive answer, thank you. Just one more little thing. 4.4 says that professional learning sessions on how to adequately use the PEF fund are offered. Do we know, I mean, what is the uptake on it says offered, but are they actually participating? Thanks.
I'll pass that to Karen, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Councillor Dashford. Yes, I don't have exact figures on me, but we do collate the data around attendance at such professional learning. Professional learning has been offered from our quality improvement team as well as from our attainment advisor. And that's under areas such as understanding the data, which helps to inform the interventions and the supports that are put in place for the young people, around the use and engagement with participatory budgeting as well. And I know we also intend to continue to offer this learning along with some professional learning around finance and budgeting.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dashmore. Thank you, Karen. Councillor Jamieson.
Yeah, thanks for letting me in. Yeah, I think the Scottish Attainment Challenge, Scottish Government funding, the policy's mission was to use education to improve outcomes for children and young people impacted by poverty, with a focus on tackling poverty-related attainment gap. And I know that it's devolved down to individual schools, which is a good thing because they've got the local knowledge. I also know that it's difficult to get a handle on, is it making a difference, because it's often qualitative rather than quantitative. Is there an ambition to develop some of the initiatives that's been used under PEF in individual schools, which I know from personal experience are really good, but it's difficult to actually sort of define the benefit? Is that closing the attainment gap? So it's just getting an understanding of how actually it's making a difference, and that ambition to close the poverty-related attainment gap. And we know that it's a struggle to close that gap. Every region, every local authority is having a struggle to close that attainment gap. With all due respect to the funding, it's not massive. So how can we maximise that potential by dovetailing it in with all the stuff that we're doing more existentially in Dumfries and Galloway, including ASN, professional development, training, etc., etc. Because we've got a major problem in Dumfries and Galloway with SIMD levels and things like that. So how do we maximise this pot of money, supporting the head teachers and the parent council's decisions, looking at what's actually making a difference and developing them further? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jamieson. Karen, would you like to take that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Jamieson. What we do have is what's coming to the area committee reports, which is the PEF impact reports, which gives that detailed information about the impact of the spend for the young people that spend was directed at. And that is shared, will be shared with you as elected members at area committee, but also that information can be shared through the quality improvement officers with other head teachers. So obviously we have that range of data in front of us about the impact. So as our officers are working with individual head teachers, the good practice that we are seeing and the practice that's having an impact in our schools, we can share that widely. Also, our head teacher professional learning days, we had one just this week, and within those there are always sessions for collaboration and sharing of good practice as well. So there's those opportunities there. And of course, within the wider central team, you know, we work very closely with supporting learners as well. So this information is shared wide and within our teams.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Jamieson. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we've got this report here, and it's basically a ledger account of who's got what they've spent, who's overspent, who's underspent, but we don't actually have anything that tells us if it's worked. Do you know, there's nothing here to say it's improved the attainment. And we're hearing that this report's going to be sent to area committees, but in actual fact, are we going to get an overview of that as a separate report, not part of the improvement report, but are we going to get a separate one that actually shows how this PEF funding's been spent and if it's actually been successful? The other question is also, if the schools are in a minus, how do you get them back into the green? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson.
Karen?
I'll pick up the. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. I'll pick up the first part, your first question there. I can absolutely share with this committee the collated PEF impact reports from all 4 areas, if that would be helpful. We can also share as well as an update to our progress against our stretch aims. And that again is around closing the poverty-related attainment gap and those markers between pupils in quintile 1 and quintile 5.
Does that answer your questions, Councillor Stevenson? Does that help?
Just the second part needs answered.
Yeah, sure thing. Through you, Chair, Councillor Stevenson, the budgets carry forward year on year, and as this is external funding, it's incumbent on the school to try and bring that back within spending limits within the budget that they've been allocated by government in the coming year. However, as you can see, there's 1 or 2 where, for various reasons, the overspends are fairly high. And what we do with the schools in those cases is we try to work with them to have a plan about how they can phase the recoup of that overspend and not try to take it all on board in the first year after it occurs, so that they're working that back over a number of years to minimise the impact of that on future years of young people that would benefit from this funding.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Karen, for this report. Quite a straightforward question. Appendix 1 on page 77. Could you explain how the top-up funding is allocated?
If I may, Chair, I'll take that question. Thank you, Councillor Young. The top-up funding is allocated by government. It's set out in the national guidance as to how they do that, and it's where the number of pupils has increased beyond a certain percentage from the initial allocation process. Because government chose to set this funding over the period of the Parliament, so that schools had some assurance as to how much funding they were going to get on an annual basis. The top-up funding was set to try and redress the balance where there had been significant changes in numbers of pupils in receipt of free school meals over a period of time. So that it's set by government, not by ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Young. Julie?
Thank you, Chair. It was page 82, the 4th, 5th bullet point down, and the 6th one as well. So it talks about meaningful engagement and being involved in the process of planning, implementing and evaluating approaches. I want to know what meaningful involvement is. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Karen, you take that.
Yes, thank you, Julie, for that question. Meaningful engagement and involvement, as we say, means consultation with parents and carers and staff members within the school to look at the needs of the individual pupils that have attracted the pupil equity funding money, but not just those children that have attracted money, because if you look at the national guidance as well, it says quite clearly that schools can make the decisions of their own local knowledge that children that would benefit from the funding, as well as the pupils that are considered when they're calculating the funding of it. So that meaningful engagement, it's that engagement with parents and carers, teachers, you know, through parent councils, through engagement sessions, through self-evaluation activities throughout the year as well. But again, to perhaps be sharing the needs, but in a very discreet way that sometimes it'll have to be, because some of this is for individual pupils. So you would perhaps be working with individual parents to say, we would like to put in a particular intervention in place to support your child, or it could be working with a wider group of parents as well, just to discuss what they are seeing as perhaps a generic need over a group of young people, to say this would be something that would benefit within the school.
Thank you. Does that help, Julie?
Yes, thank you. What about children's involvement?
Karen,
yes, again, I'll just come back in on that. Again, like with all aspects of school life, we would hope that the young people, wherever appropriate to do so, Julie, that the young people would be involved as well. And sometimes it's not always a direct conversation. It's very much that data gathering from those professionals that work with the young person on a daily basis. Yourself, the class teachers, our learning assistants, very much through those conversations that you can not elicit but pick up on the information and perhaps the factors that would make a difference for that child.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions. The first bit is on page 95, and it's about the creating new job roles using pupil equity funding. There's a danger, I would suggest, that we fall into the same trap as the previous item about learning assistants and whatever different role you want to call it, and becoming fixed term and accruing rights after 2 years. So I'm assuming we take all that into account and HR are fully involved in that process. That's the first question. And the second question, I think Susan will keep me right on this, but I think the equity funds go to the 4 area committees, is that right? Yeah, for information purposes and comment. I would like to put in a 2.3 recommendation after we finish this, and that's for a report to bring back the composite return of all 4 area committees and their comments, so that as a committee who's got oversight of it, is we can actually see what the impact is in the four areas of the region, because they might be quite different. It could be totally different, and you'll notice I want that after, because it's not our job to tell the head teachers and the others that he or she actually consult with how to spend this money. But once we've spent it, we need to know that it's been worthwhile, and and the learning from that, what it might be, for example, and then share that across the whole region. To me, it's a bit of danger actually doing it on a 4-level basis. The 4 area committees, because there's an assumption then that they're going to talk to each other. I would suggest no, as a service committee, a composite report can come back here. It's a history report. But it would let us see how the four districts, the different approaches across the 4 districts. So as an authority, we are meeting our oversight role in full.
Yes, Susan.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, Councillor Ferguson, on the HR new job roles, you're absolutely right. HR are absolutely involved. Any new job purposes are evaluated through the council job evaluation process. And just to be clear for members, new staff employed through people equity funding, although the funding is the employer, if you like, they are employed by Dumfries and Galloway Council, and where they accrue employment rights, we've had people equity funding now for 8 years, coming into the 9th, and actually where they accrue employment rights, we try to manage that as best we can. If the school no longer have a need to purchase that support through using their pupil equity funding, we try to mainstream that support wherever possible, into our learning assistant cohort, for example, or into other roles within the education service. Failing that, it would move forward as any other job family where the job is no longer required, and it would move into the council redeployment process thereafter if that's not possible to find something within the service. But HR have been fully involved. I can offer that assurance right throughout this process. In terms of the 4 area committee reports, absolutely happy to bring that back. We had actually talked before the meeting about perhaps it should be circulated, so more than happy to bring it to committee as a paper once those committees have happened, as a consolidated piece of work. Happy with that.
Thank you, Susan. Councillor Ferguson, do you still want that to be made a 2.3 recommendation, or are you happy with that?
If it's recognised in the minutes, I'm happy with that. So can we make sure it's minuted? That's coming forward in the future, Tracy. That'd be brilliant. Thanks.
That will be an action, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. Quite startled, Susan, to hear that 50% of PEF funding goes on staff, but obviously it does, hence the carry forwards. It would be useful to see how many staff each level are employed across the school estate, and I'm referring to what Councillor Ferguson just referred to as AB3, page 95. The post now evaluated and available for use under creating new job roles using PEF funding, or using PEF. General assistant, PEF primary, pupil equity worker and home link worker, PEF. And I know it says job descriptions are available on GLOW as for head teachers' use, but a broad overview of that would be useful, I think, for elected members, just to understand the process. And it's interesting, could anybody tell me what a general assistant PEF does? Is that a replacement in some way for a classroom assistant, which are now an extinct group? So it would be useful to have an overview, one of how many individuals are employed using PEF and for how long. And it's an interesting thing you're talking about as well in terms of how we manage that when they're no longer required. That seems to be really clumsy. It's not a criticism of what you do, because legislation is legislation. You have to, that's how you use it, but it does seem to be an interesting way of deploying people in terms of our children. And there is a link there, I don't know what it is yet, but there's a tenuous link there with our learning assistants as well, and how we provide support for children. So I don't know if that's all tied up as well. They're two separate things, they're two separate modes of funding. But I do think there is a connection there that has to be recognised when we're looking at how we support our children in general terms in our schools. Sorry, a long rant there, but the main question is, can we have an overview of what these individuals do? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dorward. Karen, do you want to take that, or Susan?
I'll take it, Chair. Thank you. Yes is the short answer. Yes, you can have an overview. We can collate that into the report that probably goes to area committee and then is going to come back to this committee anyhow, with how many jobs in how many places and what the contracts are, etc. We can pull that together. That's not a problem. In terms of the job roles, I'd be happy to share along with that paper when it comes back to you, the job descriptions that have been set up. My understanding of the general assistant role is more, it's not necessarily in the classroom, and it's not necessarily about what a learning assistant would do. It's more about helping the young person where they're struggling with motor skills or getting their shoes on or getting their coat on to go out or getting to school in the first place in the morning. It's that kind of lower level activity to support the child to be ready to learn in the classroom, the general assistant. But I'm happy to include in the pack that comes to members the job descriptions for these posts.
Thank you, Susan. That would be really good to have that. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Ferguson, you wanted to come back.
Sorry, my mistake actually when we spoke about taking it forwards as an action, the composite thing. Can we make sure that's included in the forward plan so that everybody can see? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Do we have any further comments? We will thank Karen and Susan for their assistance here today. Thank you. We'll now move to the recommendations. Members are asked to note individual school pupil equity fund allocations in Appendix 1 for the end of the year position Appendix 2, and that the individual school pupil equity fund reports and Quintile 1 and Quintile 5 pupil attainment will be reported on annually at Area Committee. Thank you. We will now move on to item 9. Sorry, item 8. I'm getting ahead of myself here. The statutory consultation on the Hutton Primary School, the report by the Executive Director of Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing. Jonathan is here to assist if members have any questions. I will open up the meeting for debate. Do we have any questions? Councillor Wilson.
I don't actually have any questions, but thank you for this very detailed report. It was good to see the wide variety of engagement that's been done. But I would just like to thank John and the team for, I did attend all the public meetings at Borland, and the feedback I got from the parents and carers and wider community was really good, especially given the difficult conversations that were had. So I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Wilson. It's nice to hear a positive report for once. Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Similar to Carolina, it's a long, very detailed piece of work here, and as everybody says, you follow the evidence, and the evidence here is quite stark, you know. So it's a good piece of work. It's been done. The inclusion, everybody's been done. I've had nobody come on to me saying, you know, can you lobby to try and keep the school open? I don't think that's out there anywhere. So I personally, I'm happy to go along with the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Do we have any further comments? I think we will move to recommendations. And thank John for his attendance here today too. Thank you. And yeah, we will note the content of the consultation report on the outcome of the consultation relating to the proposal to discontinue educational provision at Hutton Primary School as detailed in paragraphs 4.2 to 4.8 and in the appendix. 2.2, agree to split and realign the catchment area of Hutton Primary School to Applegarth Primary School and Langham Primary School as detailed in paragraphs 4.10, and 2.3, agree to the closure of Hutton Primary School having satisfied the requirement of the school's consultation Scotland Act 2010 as amended as detailed in 4.11. Thank you. We'll now move to item 9 on the agenda. This is to outside bodies, education, skills and community wellbeing. This report by Assistant Director, Governance and Human Resources. I will open up the meeting to member debate, but members are asked, if we move to page point. Yes, update on that, yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to draw members' attention to an update to the report. Unfortunately, some old text was picked up. So at paragraph 4.8.3.2, I've actually got an update from the link officer. The information in the report is outdated now. So the region-wide community fund is a source of grant funding for community benefit projects across Dumfries and Galloway, committing £133,000 to projects within Dumfries and Galloway last year, with a similar amount to be allocated next year. Monies are contributed from participating wind farms across the region, which is currently one, and the fund is administered by the Council, with decisions on applications being made by the Funds Management Committee. The Funds Management Committee is made up of 9 members drawn from public sector partners and independent members, with the majority to be independent of the public sector. And I will make sure that that update is included in the minute as a procedural note for members' information. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy. Do we have any questions before we begin? Councillor Ferguson.
Just one, the last one we talked there about the wind farm. That's traditionally, since its inception, been the chair of the relevant committee who sat in that, with the deputy being the vice chair. I'd be happy to move. We should just do that with them. The other two are separate, but that's the way it's always been. I don't see any reason to change it. It's only twice a year.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. We'll now look at the Local Employability and Skills Partnership, which meets 5 to 6 times per year, and we need 1 elected member and 1 substitute on that. Do we have any nominations? Councillor McGregor.
Chair, I don't know whether this was normally linked to chairs and vice chairs, but I'd be quite happy to sit on it as a member.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Do we have a substitute member? I would be happy to sit as a substitute member on that board. Thank you. We have to now appoint 3 elected members to the vacancies of the Dumfriesshire Educational Trust. Do we have any nominations for this? Any members? This is for the Annandale and Nithsdale Area Committee. Councillor Stevenson, are you staying on this committee?
I'm happy to stay on it, yeah.
Councillor McGregor.
Yeah, just for the benefit of members that maybe aren't as familiar with DET, I've been sitting on it now for 17.5 years, and it meets a couple of times a year. It's not onerous. The meetings are fairly short. They are giving out some significant funding to some individuals in the region and small funds for schools, but they do manage the art collection through Gracefield, which is fairly significant and important. But I sit on it anyway through Annandale and Nithsdale Area Committee. Happy to stay on it in that space, but it was just to let members who maybe aren't as familiar with it know what it does and the frequency, and it is really important.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. So do we have any other nominations? Councillor Dempster. Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. I did serve and still do serve as it's actually in the paper, one of the members has to represent Sanker District, so I'm happy to remain there if there's need for my name to be put forward today. If not, I'm just happy to be considered as an existing member. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dempster. That's for the Sanker area. Thank you. Do we have any further nominations? I think that's, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, Councillor Dempster, you already sit on the Dumfries Educational Trust through Nithsdale Area Committee, so you're already a member. This report today is just asking for 3 nominations from this committee that don't already sit on it as part of an area committee. So we've currently got, from this committee, we have Councillors Brodie, Stevenson and Wilson. I'm looking for another 3 from this committee who don't sit on the Educational Trust as part of any of the area committees.
Day fine with me, Tracy. Thank you.
So do we have any other nominations? I think we can just leave it as it is. That one. Thank you. Farm Regional Trust, as Councillor Ferguson has covered that one, sits on that. Thank you. Any other business deemed by the Chair? I have no further business. So thank you all for your attendance here today. Thank you and all your contributions to the meeting. Thank you.